A beast is coming.
So we're remaking Infamous, are we? Well, listen up kids, here's how you do it. In my reimagining of Infamous, we combine the first two games into a more or less seamless experience. The two parts still distinguish gameplay-wise, but are a more unified picture that borrow elements from each other to enhance the experience overall. Well, how do we do that, you might ask? Let's start with the combat. Infamous 1 combat is fun, although, like many aspects of the game, rudimentary. I envision the remake starts with a melee overhaul. In Infamous 1, melee is pretty much useless due to the cover shooter layout of levels and the low damage of your attacks. In this remake, Cole has 2 melee weapons. He starts with metal knuckles on his parkour wraps, a brutal and uncivilized reflection of the measures one must take to survive in Empire City. Functionally and animation-wise, these can work the same as the hand-to-hand combat in the original, with the caveat, you can do higher base damage and unlock the ability to charge up the middle with electric bonus damage that drains your energy akin to the gigawatt blades. Furthermore, Cole unlocks a chain pretty early on, which trades the high damage for AoE attacks and greater range, again with the ability to charge up. You might already be seeing the parallels to Infamous Second Son, that's not an accident. You should be able to switch between these weapons on the fly for added player agency. We're also going to borrow Ionic drops from the second game and implement them here. Ionic Storm can be linked to this, of course, but also Karmic Overload. In this remake, we call it Ionic Surge. Because Karmic Overload is a late game power, we can tie Ionic Surge to late game here too. Fundamentally, what we are doing is replacing an attack that had a karmic cost to one that has a more reliable source of power. Lastly, we're going to take the electric power skill tree and implement it here in the first game, allowing the power scaling to be more personalized and varied over the course of a game that can feel very repetitive at times. Going into the second game, we can build upon the melee combat by adding in the amp, finishes, and parries. This replaces the fists from the first game, but the chain is still available as an option. Parries will be effective against the Corrupted, who can be countered and punished with an instant KO if you time it right. The Ravager, who is already resistant to your lightning bolt and often makes melee attacks, a well-timed parry would stun it, leaving it open for massive damage potential. Same goes for the Ice Crusher and any new melee variant of the Militia or Iceman that could fit into this system. The powers in the second game should also be handled differently. In Infamous 2, each power has 3 variants for good and evil karma respectively, with the ability to be swapped out on the fly. Except, not really. You go into a pseudo pause menu to make the change that you want, interrupting the flow of gameplay. In the remake, we would remedy this by binding the ability change to an extra button. Now, you can mix up your combat experience more seamlessly, and paired with my next modification, we end up with a much more diverse and robust combat experience. In Infamous 2, around halfway through the game, you gain a new elemental ability, Ice or Napalm. In theory, this is pretty cool. In practice, the utility often ends at an extra traversal option. So in this remake, we do the obvious thing. Ice and Napalm each come with their own set of abilities and upgrades akin to Second Son. But to improve on the implementation in that game, you don't need to look for a source of power each time you want to switch. Instead, you can seamlessly alternate power sets on the fly and expend the related fuel source independent of your other powers. Now pair this with enemy diversity that have elemental resistances. Maybe the Militia start wearing insulated suits that make lightning attacks less effective, and the swamp monsters have natural resistance to napalm. The ice soldiers shouldn't be weak to their literal gimmick, it encourages variation in play. It would also be a great quality of life change to gain the new power set earlier in the game to immediately distinguish combat in the sequel. One of the main complaints lodged against Infamous 1 at the time was the rudimentary and inconsistent traversal mechanics. Now this was for 2 reasons. 1, the world was often far too vertical, relying on slow and finicky climbing animations, and 2, a moveset that didn't nullify this frustration at all. In Infamous 2, they improved upon this greatly by making New Marais a much flatter city that encouraged you to traverse the X-axis at maximum speeds. Power lines, grind rails, and an improved glide, everything in this game's map was built around getting you to the rooftops as quickly as possible and allowing you to traverse them with ease. So in our remake, we are going to borrow some of those mechanics and implement a few more too. In Infamous 1, we are going to have the improved glide, the car jump, power pole ascends, and furthermore, we build upon the parkour with back ejects, wall running, and a magnetized power. In my mind, the magnetized power allows Cole to traverse small distances that are just out of reach for his regular jump. However, we limit it to specific objects that make sense for the ability. Lampposts, neon signs, that sort of thing. And to really seal the deal, we allow him to power jump from these objects the same as we do with power poles in the second game. We now have a robust movement system that makes the verticality of Empire City more rewarding, or at least less frustrating. Finally, I would add a fast travel system between islands in the first game, because let's be honest, Infamous 1 is just way too big. To build upon movement in Game 2, we port over these new mechanics but also expand upon elemental traversal. The ice launch is great. Let's also give him an ice slide like those annoying ass shotgun guys. Then he can chain it with the ice launch and get massive momentum for a glide. With the Firebird Strike, take out the strike element and allow it to build momentum. And why not allow it to be omnidirectional too? Let Cole travel in whichever direction he chooses with this instead of just in a straight shot. Okay, so we have new abilities, both to fight and traverse this world seamlessly, but what about the world itself? How can we make it feel more alive, more responsive, and make it encourage us to use these powers to their full potential? Well, you copy GTA 5. Here's the idea. Infamous 1 and 2 both have a liberation system, side missions which are prompted by NPCs who have a particular grievance or vendetta to settle in the world, and Cole gets to respond in kind. You can go with the evil route and claim areas of the map as your territory, or you can liberate it for the people. Either way, enemy spawn rates and random crimes are greatly reduced. In our remake, what if Cole is causing a ruckus in an area that isn't liberated and it causes the primary faction of the island to show up? Random fights on the street, stopping crimes, or assaulting pedestrians catches people's attention, and an increasing force starts to show up and escalate the situation. The players can then either fight waves of enemies until they overwhelm them, or break notoriety by leaving the area. On the other hand, if Cole is causing a ruckus in an area he has liberated, then cops will show up and either assist him if he is doing good, or fight him if he is doing bad. If he does the same thing in a region he has dominated, then no one will come. Fear of the demon creates a playground void of consequences. Of course, I can't talk about the world of Infamous without talking about the karma system. I don't love it. Okay, hear me out. When you play either Infamous game, you are more or less locked onto one path of binary good or evil if you want to get the most out of your gameplay experience. This is because certain powers are locked behind karmic rank. In my remake, I would have the karma more accurately reflect the sum total of your actions, good and bad. Your good and evil karma are independent of each other. Good actions reward good karma, and evil actions reward evil karma, but they don't fight each other. This way, when you are presented with choices, you don't feel like you are being punished for pursuing either option. Powers and abilities can still be locked, but they are not limited to the kind of playthrough you are on. Aside from gameplay freedom, this change allows for more RP opportunities and the ability to get inside Cole's head, allowing more nuance to decisions. For example, when Cole is faced with the choice to turn a valve that will blast him with tar or to have a civilian do it for him, the player gets to evaluate whether the moral choice is really the best one. Is having Empire City's only hope of salvation in a weakened and delirious state worth the risk? Maybe not. You get to decide this instead of just choosing the blue option because you want blue superpowers in this playthrough. We can still have karma affect appearances too, but maybe the corruption of evil karma is more nuanced. A Cole who is mostly good but had to make some hard choices along the way can have blue lightning, a hero's garb, and a strong posture, but the darkness is seeping in ever so slightly. Blackened fingers, hints of red in the costume, and skin that is ever so slightly paler than it used to be. Building on this system would be a fleshed out reputation system. Cole's infamy should be unique to each island. After all, these communities are more or less cut off from each other. For example, if Cole's war against the militia has been pursued through just means and liberation, they can love him, shouting his praises in the streets. But when he gets to Floodtown, a community that is surrounded by monsters, oppressed by superpowered beings, he should be feared all over again. He has to prove to them that he is on their side, not just loved because he wears a white shirt. The amount of good or bad actions taken in an area are the determining factor in your reputation, not overall karma rank. The exception to this would be major story events like detonating the race fair a second time, an event which would be known across the entire city. Okay, so we have a less binary karma system and a world that reacts to it more organically. If we're going to have more nuance in our choices and the freedom to explore good or bad options based on our own will, not the game's, then let's make those choices carry more weight. At the start of Infamous 1, you are given the choice between sharing a food drop with the civilians nearby or keeping it all for yourself. Narratively, this is interesting, because in the abandoned and quarantined city, Cole very well might want to keep the food for himself. On the other hand, does he want to make an enemy of himself when he's only just getting the hang of his powers and potentially alienate his friends in the process? An interesting choice. But let's make it even better. Let's reward players for being selfish. Let's tell players, hey, if you take the food for yourself, you get an increase in energy, the system that directly affects your power level in the Infamous franchise. Now Cole's selfishness and the players is being tested, not just your sense of morality. For another example, Cole is at one point faced with telling this man in the sewer about his dead wife or threatening him with violence to get him to open a door that you need to get through. In the original game, it doesn't matter what you choose, outside the karma reward you want. What if doing the right thing makes the guy furious and he refuses to believe you? Now the player can either go back on their choice and aim at him to coerce him into doing what you want, effectively undoing the good deed, or find another way around and prolonging your journey through the sewers. This idea was directly inspired by the choice from earlier when you can get a citizen to splash himself with tar, saving you from doing it. Did you know that after you get him to do that, you can actually heal the guy? An intentional feature by the devs? Probably not, but one that adds nuance to the choice regardless. Okay, so now we've got our core mechanics, let's expand the material even further. In my mind, this game can be experienced as one seamless story. You can go through the first game and make your choices, but then we get new content. You might not know this, but there is a canon comic, a 6-issue miniseries that bridges the gap between Infamous 1 and 2. If you ever wondered where the hell Quo came from, why the team is going to Florida, or why Zeke and Cole made up, it's because there's plot that we never actually got to play. Why not include it in the remake? The story of the comic goes like this. Cole is dealing with the fallout of the first game and the revelation of who Kessler was. It also has a heavy focus on Cole and Zeke's fractured relationship and how they are going to move forward. Interesting stuff, right? Yeah, well, it's not just plot heavy either, there is plenty of action for our gameplay purposes. Early in the comic, Cole is contracted to hunt down and exterminate the remnant of the First Sons. At the same time, Cole is being hunted by David, a ghoulish looking motherfucker who has a vendetta against Kessler and as a result, the player. On top of this, Moya, who has turned on Cole at this point, gets the US military to raid Empire City and capture Cole, turning the city into a war zone that devastates the population. In my mind, we limit this intermediary story to just one island. We have our superpowered foes in the First Sons, our grunt enemies in the form of the military, who are far more organized and threatening than the Reapers ever were, and following the story, the opportunity for a couple good boss fights against David. In terms of karma, the player who has chosen to detonate the race fair a second time gets to power trip with their Black Lightning just a little while longer. And choice-wise, maybe let's let the player decide David and Moya's fate. That could be interesting. This interlude should be kept short and sweet, just a little bonus content where we get to flesh out this world and the characters more. When the beast shows up in part 2, we can turn up the scale a little more, make the player feel overconfident with all the power they have gained, but have the beast dominate. Not through arbitrarily winning in a cutscene, but because he really is just too strong. For scale, you can think of something like Sandman in Spider-Man 2, and mechanically you can employ the old Souls-like trick of a boss who is just so out of your league it takes a real miracle to actually beat it. You're supposed to lose here, and when you are defeated, again through gameplay, Cole loses it and it plays out the same way. We transition into the second game and Cole loses his shield, ionic powers, Black Lightning, and skill tree upgrades. On the note of the beast, boss fights need a big rework. I don't think it's controversial to say that the boss fights in Infamous are neither difficult nor mechanically deep, so let's fix that. Starting with Sasha's fight, I see it reworked to be more like Nyx's in the second game. Instead of just waiting for an opening, you are two conduits who move and fight dynamically, but this is her domain. She can disappear into the tar to regenerate or just to disorientate the player. Cole has to mind his footing at the same time, as it already plays out in the game, but you are still using your traversal abilities on the fly to stay ahead of Sasha's attacks. She mixes up melee and ranged attacks, and you can interrupt the flow of her abilities with stuns and high damage. The key should be to keep things moving, despite the cramped environment. Alden, on the other hand, should be rampaging through the city, similar to the first Bertrand fight, except our remake amps up the level of destructible environments that were only hinted at in Infamous 2. If you're on top of a building, firing at Alden, he might hurl a car at you which tears through the building, doing massive damage and knocking you back if it connects, forcing you to stay mobile and find new ground regardless. The same goes for the final fight against the Beast, which in the original is laughably easy. He should be tearing through New Marais, give him devastating AoE attacks, make him absorb bystanders to regenerate health. Throw cars, kick through buildings. Cole's fight against the Beast should be a race against time before he levels the city completely. Quo and Nyx's fights are fine conceptually, but again far too easy. Give them bigger attack varieties, bigger health bars, and make Quo move through the city forcing you to chase her like Nyx does. That would be a good start. Kessler's fight is fine, in my opinion. As the climax of the game, it deserves to be better. It's cool at ground zero, but Kessler can teleport. Why not implement that into gameplay in a bigger way? Maybe when he grabs you, he teleports you to a different part of the city, and now the stakes and gameplay have changed. There is traversal elements to consider and innocent bystanders if you care. This might happen multiple times in different locales that provide fresh and unique challenges. If you want to get really nutty, time travel powers might start to play up during the fight, temporarily causing Ground Zero to be reverted back to the state of peace pre-race fair detonation, to hammer in the contrast that the city has gone through. A few miscellaneous add-ons I'd like to suggest here are more outfits in both games. Infamous is a superhero game. Infamous 2 has a few cool options already that should be brought back, but why not have multiple dynamic outfits that can be affected by karma rank? Seems like a no-brainer. Also, in my version, the choice of ice or napalm are not karma locked because logically it makes no sense at all. To build on that, you should have the choice to color code your abilities if you want. Want to be a hero with blue napalm? Why not? Or a villain with red ice? Sure, sounds dope as hell to me. There are of course things from the original game which absolutely should not be changed, starting with the original performances. The voice cast across both games bring these characters to life with insane amounts of charisma that is rare to find in video games, especially from this time. The writing and voice acting are key components of what make these games great, and despite the fact Sucker Punch has strayed far away from any content that could be seen as any kind of problematic in the sequels, it would be pretty cowardly to neuter the edgy 2000s vibe present here. It's part of its identity after all. Now you might be thinking, okay, what about the VA change? Cole, of course, is played by Jason Cottle in the first game and then replaced by Eric Landon in the second one. A lot of people have a gripe with Jason's raspy, gravel-gargling voice. I personally don't mind it. Even the transition to the second game didn't strike me as a massive departure from the original voice. At least as a kid, I rationalized it as the race fair frying Cole's vocal cords to the point where he sounds like Batman, but over time he heals and starts to sound more like himself again. For the interlude segment, I'm sure Eric would be happy to reprise his role. The original art and music. This is a small thing but an obvious one. Infamous 1 employed static cutscenes in places to save on budget, but the art was so cool and so iconic that it was a trend maintained across the series. The original art still holds up, just keep it. And for the music, for the love of God, don't do an Until Dawn. The original score is phenomenal and a key part of people's nostalgia for these games, so just port it right over. The ending of the second game shouldn't be rank locked. Think about the kind of Cole you might play in this new game, one that is less restricted by karmic rank, one that perhaps started out selfish in the first game, putting your needs above others as Cole probably would do. But Trish dies and tells Cole she's ashamed of him. This guilt motivates him to change his life around and start fighting for the good of the people. He uses his power to save, liberate, and turn the city into a place that has hope again, and then the Beast shows up. It massacres the entire city, the only home Cole has ever known. What might that do to a person? Now, in the second game, Cole believes Trish was wrong. Righteousness is a fool's errand, and the only thing that matters is becoming as powerful as possible to stop the Beast. Or at least that's what he tells himself. However, as the game progresses and Cole's friends start to look down on him and even be afraid of him because of his actions, that guilt starts to eat away at him again. By the end of the game, Cole is faced with a crucial choice: side with the Beast or destroy all conduits, even himself. In his final act, Cole sees a shot at redemption, a chance to, despite all the damage he's done, make things right, redeem himself, and even make Trish proud in his final act. That's pretty compelling if you ask me, and that is a story sculpted by the player. Inversely, imagine a Cole that stayed in the light, held on to Trish's final words even after the destruction of Empire City, but he was never quite the same. He chose good often, yes, but not out of conviction, out of necessity, because he knew that if he let himself give in, he wouldn't turn back. This version of Cole might bio-leech a downed enemy, not because he needs to, but because he wants to. He might start being more reckless in his fight and not bother to tend to the wounded after a battle. When a group of protesters walks towards him on the street calling for his execution, this version of Cole might just snap. And in the end, when faced with his own death, or the dawn of a new world, one in which he has the power to effect whatever change he sees fit, one where he will never be so powerless as to watch his world crumble around him again, he chooses to side with the beast. You can imagine your own twists on this, like a Cole who was a good Samaritan throughout the first game, but became increasingly motivated by fear of the new powerful conduits around him, ultimately deciding his only play against Kessler was to activate the Race Fair a second time, and then play out how this character might change going into the sequel. Having that power taken away by his defeat at the hands of the beast, what might he do from there? Well, it's up to you. So that's my vision for an Infamous remake. What did you think? Did you like my ideas, hate them, have your own thoughts on what else could be changed? Let me know down in the comments. Take all this with a grain of salt. I'm not a game designer, this is just what I personally would love to see out of a remake. Alrighty, hope you enjoyed, like the video if you did, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.